Another killing. Another day of unrest as immigration raids continue in Minnesota.
An individual approached U.S. Border Patrol agents with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun.
We believe he is a lawful gun owner with a permit to carry.
The agents attempted to disarm the individual, but he violently resisted.
Committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts.
Thank God we have video, because according to DHS, these 7 heroic guys took an onslaught of a battalion against them or something.
How many more residents, how many more Americans need to die or get badly hurt for this operation to end?
Donald Trump, I call on you once again. Remove this force from Minnesota.
The death of a 37-year-old Veterans Administration ICU nurse, just the latest flashpoint in a White House campaign that is shaking the nation, now heading for Maine. But in Washington, the controversy appears to have already derailed a bipartisan deal on government funding that may bring a shutdown this week. Washington and much of the nation is already shut down as a titanic winter storm puts more than 200 million Americans and dozens of states in a deep freeze.
You're looking to get ahead of your shoveling situation. You're waking up to a big job.
We can finally eat all the food we bought. So I thought a cold piece of pizza, it was outstanding at 6 o'clock this morning.
Braving the weather with us today, Maine Congresswoman Chellie Pingree, a key House appropriator on the funding deal as ICE ramps up operations in her state. Florida Republican Bryon Donalds, the congressman who is the front runner to become the Sunshine State's next governor. And a very special conversation with Gordon Wood, the foremost historian of America's founding at the 250th anniversary. All that and our best in the business panel of journalists. The Hill Sunday starts right now. Hello from a snowbound Washington, and welcome to the Hill Sunday. I'm Chris Stirewalt. NewsNation's Mills Hayes has been covering the crisis in Minneapolis for us from the beginning, despite the sub-zero temperatures. She joins us now. Mills, what's the latest?
Hi, Chris. Well, I'm standing right where Alex Preddy was killed just yesterday by a Border Patrol agent. You can see that there is a visual in place with flowers and candles. There is a woman that is audibly crying right now, and we've seen that throughout this morning, people coming up, getting emotional about this because it is a very devastating for people who live here in Minneapolis. Now, I want to take you guys to the video of that shooting. We've got a couple of different angles, but this video shows the moments leading up to the shooting where you can see that Alex Preddy is holding his cell phone and he's being pushed by an officer. Now, witnesses say about 15 observers were on the scene recording agents as DHS says that they were conducting a targeted enforcement of an undocumented man wanted for domestic assault. And DHS says that the agent fired defensive shots after a man with a gun approached them and violently resisted when officers tried to disarm him. But no bystander video we've seen shows Preddy with a visible weapon. In the video, he's tackled to the ground by at least 4 officers, and it appears that a federal officer in a gray jacket reaches into the scuffle empty-handed and emerges with a gun before at least 9 shots are fired. Preddy's family says that he was an ICU nurse at the VA hospital here and had been protesting the immigration crackdown in the city. And in a statement, they said that the sickening lies told about our son by the administration are reprehensible and disgusting, adding that Alex is clearly not holding a gun when attacked. And Minneapolis police say that Preddy did have a license to carry a firearm and that he had no criminal record besides a few traffic tickets. We also know that the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, as well as state investigators, filed a lawsuit last night to make sure that DHS preserves all evidence in this case. The judge did rule in their favor because yesterday state investigators say that they came onto the scene but were denied access by DHS. But this has sparked hundreds of protesters to come out here on this block, and it was all blocked out. They had put up makeshift barricades to block off law enforcement from this area as well. And so it was a long night out here, and many of these businesses were closed as well, and also offering hand warmers and food and water to a lot of the anti-ICE demonstrators that were on the ground. Minnesota National Guard also activated to help with local police efforts as well. We see Minneapolis police on the scene at this moment right now, and more protests are planned later today, Chris, as well as in Chicago and other cities across the country reacting to this fatal shooting. Chris?
Mills Hayes, thanks so much for your great work out there. Keep it up. We appreciate you. Okay, in his remarks, Governor Walz warned residents of other states now targeted by Homeland Security.
I've said it a lot, but America, as you're listening, enough is enough. Enough is enough of this. End this. End this. And we see them moving to Maine. If you're in Boston, you're in Chicago, you're in Philly, you're in Miami, it doesn't matter. We can't live like this.
Those operations in Maine are already causing an uproar, and they're also dividing the state's Democrats. With us now, Congresswoman Chellie Pingree. She is a Democrat who represents Eastern Maine, including Portland, which is in the bullseye for the Trump administration. Congresswoman, I really appreciate you being with us today. I want to just start with your reaction to Saturday's shooting. What did you see?
Oh, it's unconscionable. And thank you to all the observers who were there so we can see these videotapes. See a man, as we've heard, an ICU nurse who had a permit to carry, pushed down onto the ground, not really resisting. They take his gun away and then they shoot him 9 times. It's just unconscionable. Also, that this administration thinks there is nothing to investigate here. In every law enforcement shooting in my state or any other state, there is always an investigation. For this administration to try to remove the evidence or to say from the start, oh, he's a domestic terrorist, or to try to characterize what has gone on without having the actual facts is just unthinkable. And my heart goes out to his family, deepest sympathy to all the people who worked with him, to the VA residents who he's been helping to care for, and for the city of Minneapolis. I mean, people are under so much stress, and now it's in my state, and I know how distressing this is to people and how lawless these operations are.
Okay, so the fear now for some Mainers is that they will see the same thing play out in your state. Prior to the shooting, we saw different approaches from officials. Governor Janet Mills called ICE's actions, quote, reckless, and that they would not be tolerated in Maine. But your fellow Pine Tree State Congressman Jared Golden went on social media to tell protesters, including his fellow public officials, to, quote, not obstruct or impede law enforcement activities and not amplify tensions. Those seem like different approaches. Am I right? And which one sounds more correct to you?
Well, welcome to the Big Tent of the Democratic Party. But I do think Jared was in the minority on this. He voted to fully fund Homeland Security, and the Democrats, for the most part, have said, hey, it's our only opportunity to slow this down, to get some real conditions in an appropriations bill that talk about how ICE operations are conducted, how they're trained, who's allowed to be in our state, and this ridiculous amount of money that they got through the big ugly bill, and now we'll get even more through the appropriations process that is going to things like excessive numbers of ICE agents in a state like ours. I mean, I don't know how to put it any other way. We are the whitest state in the nation. We're 47th in the number of undocumented immigrants. And my office has 3 people who work full-time, have been all of last year on this Trump administration's picking up people with documented asylum cases, with work permits, with making it increasingly difficult for people to go to work, to go to school. And having these excessive ICE agents in our state now means it's all day long. And while I don't think there's any opposition to picking up hardened criminals or people who we don't really want in our state or who have truly violated immigration law. The vast majority are people who are legally here in the process, waiting for their court date as asylum seekers, and they have work permits. I'm hearing from so many employers who can't run their production lines, who can't operate their restaurants. These are a huge percentage of the people who work in our hospitals and our long-term care facilities. It's very disruptive to our economy, and it's also so frightening for our residents.
Okay, on the shutdown point, it sounds like Democrats in the Senate now, enough of them agree with your point of view, and they're not going to go along with the deal. Susan Collins, the Republican senator from Maine, told our own Joe Khalil that she's trying to work out a deal that might split off Homeland Security funding, but still allow the rest of the package to pass. That would limit the scope of the shutdown. From your House Appropriations side, does that sound like something that's plausible?
Well, that's basically what happened in the House. As you know, we had three bills voted on in a package last week, and then a separated vote on Homeland Security. So that's where most of the Democrats voted against the Homeland Security bill, taking that stand. And look, I mean, I think we should get a lot of credit as appropriators, as Democrats. We did not want to see another government shutdown. We have been working, our staffs worked all through the holidays to get every one of those appropriations bills done, and we came to a lot of compromise. We ate some things we didn't like, and to the Republicans' credit in the Appropriations Committee, many of them went along with things that they didn't like and went against the administration. But this Homeland Security bill is a bill too far. So how the Senate will handle that, perhaps like the House, may really color how this thing goes. And you're right, we will have passed all 11 of the other subcommittee bills, but not Homeland Security if they go against this in the Senate.
Okay, shutdowns are easier to start than stop. Last time, the Democrats did what is being contemplated now. The administration maximized the pain, and eventually enough Senate Democrats backed down with any substantial concessions. It may have been a political win, but there was no policy gain. What would make this time any different?
I think it would also feel very uncomfortable. I mean, the one difference here is that we've already passed 11 of the bills. So you're not stopping the operations in those areas, but you would in the Homeland Security area. And, you know, in my state, that impacts the Coast Guard, impacts FEMA. With these storms going across the country, that could have a huge impact in our country. So there would be a real impact to it.
Okay, what about the fraud claims? I have to ask you very quickly. Pam Bondi told Minnesota it's because of the fraud. That's why we won't leave Minnesota with the surge. They're making a similar claim about Maine, and I assume to Janet Mills. Talk about the instance of Medicaid fraud in Maine and how that may have triggered this, and whether you think that's a legitimate inquiry from the Attorney General.
Look, any incidents of fraud with federal money, whether it's at the highest level of hospital operators or it's a community organization that may be misrepresenting something, should be 100% investigated, and anyone who commits that level of crime should be convicted and sent to jail. I don't oppose that. No one opposes that in our state, and I don't think they do in Minnesota either. We have a tiny Somali population, and for the president to say the dehumanizing things he did about these longtime Mainers, most of them are, American citizens. They've been here so long, as they have been in Minnesota. That's just appalling what they're doing. And they change their opinion all the time. They say they're coming in because of that. I mean, that doesn't make any sense in Maine. And now you have Pam Bondi sending a letter to Minnesota saying, okay, we'll get out if you give us our voter rolls. The voter rolls? What does that possibly have to do with the fact that they've murdered 2 Minnesota citizens already, and they're picking up people and deporting them as fast as they can without legal representation, getting them to Texas, and we're seeing exactly the same thing here in only less than a week that they've been in our state.
Okay, Congresswoman, thanks so much for being with us today. America, if you were from Higgins Beach, Maine, you would know her already, but if you don't, there she is, Congresswoman Chellie Pingree. We thank you so much for joining us. Joining us now from his district in Southwest Florida is Republican Congressman Bryon Donalds. Congressman, just start out the same place. I want to give you an opportunity to what you saw in Minnesota and what your colleagues said about the shooting.
Well, first of all, look, let's be clear. Nobody wants to see any American lose their life like this. Nobody wants to see that. But we also have to be honest about what's happening in Minneapolis. You have paid agitators. You have a coordinated protesting operation going on in Minneapolis for the sole purpose of doxing ICE officers, impeding ICE officers, stopping them from following and executing federal law. My Democratic colleagues don't care about federal law because when Joe Biden was president of the United States, they allowed him to bastardize asylum claims, basically allow more than 10 million people into the country illegally and put them in court hearings, which won't occur for 7 to 10 years. And if you talk to Border Patrol agents, these people don't even show up. These illegal aliens don't even show up for the first hearing. About 5% show up for the hearings. So this is a sham on the American people. So when President Trump, who, by the way, won a political mandate to deport criminal illegal aliens, when he goes to execute that mandate on behalf of the American people, what do you see? You see Democrat leadership who are using terrible language about these ICE officers in the beginning, calling them Gestapo, calling them the SS, to raise emotions, to raise outrage. And then you have these paid-for, astroturfed front group operations happening in the city of Minneapolis. That has created a powder keg. That powder keg was not created by following federal law. It was followed by Democrat leadership and, quite frankly, Democrat billionaires who want to do one thing, and that's stop Donald Trump.
I want to clarify. You're not saying that Mr. Preddy was a paid agitator or an outside insurgent who was brought in to Minnesota, right?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that what people are seeing on their phones and on news networks around the country is the result of paid protests and paid agitators. That's what I'm saying. And so we're already starting to see some information about a high-level coordinated effort to follow these ICE officers. And now you've had 2 Americans lose their lives as a result of that. And also, let's create the dichotomy. In Florida, we're completely cooperating with ICE in the state of Florida. You're not seeing not even just the crazy protests or the agitated protests. You're not seeing, obviously, these issues in Florida like you're seeing in Minnesota. And that's because Governor Walz and Democrat leadership in Minnesota want nothing more than to create a political powder keg so they have an opportunity to win elections in the future.
Okay, so there's been a lot of reporting on the tensions within Department of Homeland Security. Kristi Noem has reportedly sidelined the president's border czar, Tom Homan, and the ICE director in favor of Bovino because Homan, it's reported, wants the targeted enforcement and not these high visibility raids. I want to read to you what conservative commentator Eric Erickson said about it. Quote, "It's not just Tim Walz and Jacob Fry driving these tensions. It is a policy choice made by the Secretary of Homeland Security and those around her because they thought it would make for great coverage." How do you respond to Erickson's characterization?
Now, I can't respond to Eric's characterization because somebody's probably giving him information that I don't have. What I will say is this. You have Democrat leadership who are saying that these communities are being invaded. That is simply not true. It is not constitutional. It is not following the law. The federal government, when the Constitution was ratified, was given enumerated powers that also include security of the nation and naturalization. State officials have a responsibility to cooperate with federal law enforcement, which does include ICE. What they are doing right now, in my view, is they're not upholding their oaths to the Constitution. And then they're foaming this, they're creating this unrest, which is now having citizens who are in these streets who are going after these ICE agents. They are trying to take full videography of these ICE agents and photography. And unfortunately, what we have now seen is 2 Americans have lost their lives simply because Democrats don't have a policy platform for the American people. All they know how to do is create unrest with the American people.
Okay, a new poll suggests that a growing number of Republicans are uneasy with the tactics, as many as 1 in 5 Trump voters from 2024. Here's what your fellow Florida Republican Maria Salazar said. ICE should focus on the bad hombres, that's it, not the cleaning ladies. One thing is the gardeners, another thing is the gangsters. One thing is the cooks, the other thing is the coyotes. It seems like there is real division inside the Republican Party over these tactics at this point. Is that true?
I think there's disagreements within the party, but I think we also have to be realistic about where we are. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, Joe Biden let in more than 10 million people into our country. All of them were put into some quasi process that is, frankly, does not follow federal law. So what is a new administration supposed to do? Just sit there and not actually take action? No, that's inappropriate. You have to go through the process of deporting criminal illegal aliens. That is what the Trump administration is doing. We should also note that the Department of Homeland Security has reported that more than 2 million illegal aliens have self-deported. They made a decision to return to their home countries on their own. If you look at Homeland's numbers, that's more than, now we're up to about 2.6 to 2.7 million illegal aliens have either chosen to self-deport or have been deported by ICE. And so if you look at where the country was in 2024, the American people were frustrated that our borders were wide open, that fentanyl was killing our people. Going through this process of removing criminal illegal aliens was never going to be simple and never going to be easy. But it makes it far more difficult when you have Democratic leadership in Washington and in these states decide they want to make a political point and a political spectacle so they can win elections in the midterms and beyond.
Okay, very quickly, part of what Congresswoman Salazar may be bothered by is that the Trump administration has reversed some longstanding protections for Cuban immigrants who were previously treated more as refugees from the Castro regime. New York Times says 1,600 Cubans were sent back in 2025. I'm old. I remember the outrage about Elian Gonzalez. I get the upset here. What do you say to Cuban Americans in Florida who say that this is too much?
Well, look, first to the Cuban Americans, obviously in Florida and around the country, we stand by you because your asylum claims, in my view, are 100% valid because the Castro and then now the continued regime in Cuba, the communist regime, has been destructive of human liberty on the island of Cuba. So I stand by them 100%. I think if you're going to talk about some who have been sent back, it really depends on when they came to the United States and what was the process. If they came in through the years of Joe Biden, we don't really know what that process was because what they did was so unlawful and did not follow federal law. It is the #1 reason why Donald Trump swept the battleground states and won a political mandate to get border security and illegal immigration under control.
We have to go. We are grateful to you. All right, America, if you were enjoying sunshine and a high of 83 degrees in Rainbow Groves, Florida today, you would know him already. But if you don't, there he is, Congressman Bryon Donalds. We thank you. Coming up, another government shutdown seems inevitable. Also inevitable, the excellence of our best in the business panel of journalists when we come back. Welcome back. With us now our snow brave, best in the business panel of journalists who have tromped over here to share their wisdom with you. Jack Butler is a deputy opinion editor for the Wall Street Journal. Margaret Talev, our friend, she is a veteran reporter and director of Syracuse University's Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship. And Joe Khalil, NewsNation's senior Capitol Hill correspondent. Jack, we start with you. In the first Trump term, it was kids in cages, and the administration disputed this, but it did eventually U-turn, right? We did see in the first Trump term the turn on immigration, where the tactics overwhelmed the benefits politically. Are we there? These two shootings in Minnesota, is that this, or what do you see happening from the administration next?
What do I see happening from the administration next? Well, there's a curious paradox in politics, which is that once you've tackled an issue, it almost becomes less advantageous to you. You get diminishing returns. So Trump, by merely getting returned to the White House, solved to a considerable extent the border crisis that Joe Biden left him. So now we're at the point of, to some extent, diminishing returns. We've got these highly demonstrative investigations into places like Minneapolis that are very showy, but how much are they really accomplishing for the Trump administration on this issue? I think maybe not as much anymore. The polling certainly bears that out. So I think it should be worried, but will it act? I'm not sure.
Joe, what about the Bovino matter? There's lots of this reporting about the tension between Tom Homan and Kristi Noem, and he has openly sort of second-guessed her approach. Is that real? Is it consequential? I assume Republicans in Congress are talking about it.
So I've heard Republicans say this: whatever happens on the ground happens, and you have an investigation beyond that. But what I think Republicans are frustrated with, some of them, is the sort of let's immediately put out a statement and characterize everything that has happened.
Yeah.
And you don't see that as much from Tom Homan, frankly, as you do from Kristi Noem and from the others. And I think what puts Republicans in a difficult spot, and when they will privately air out their frustration is when they have to all of a sudden defend not just officers who have done something and let's wait to see what an investigation finds, but when they have to then defend the administration saying things like, well, this is a domestic terrorist, or this person was actively trying to massacre ICE officers, which is a different thing.
To say nothing of Second Amendment enthusiasts who have had have had a little chirping about the administration's characterization. So, Margaret, we heard from Congresswoman Pingree, thanks in part to Joe's reporting about what Susan Collins is trying to do and what other Republicans in the Senate are trying to do, is shuck off the DHS funding from the overall bill so that if there's a shutdown, that it's only a DHS shutdown and everything else is passed. Senate Democrats have a problem, which is their rank and file are furious. They are beyond, their blood is boiling over this shooting, the Renee Good shooting, and now this. They are outraged. A partial government shutdown is not going to feed the bulldog for a lot of Democrats, right?
These are Americans who have been killed in these operations in the last 2 weeks and a couple of days. Americans, including in this most recent case, an intensive care nurse who treats veterans who had a permit to carry the weapon. So there are actually a lot of Republicans who are also very upset about it and would like to have some accountability and transparency. And you've got Trump-appointed judges saying you need to preserve evidence in this case. So I think it actually goes beyond Democrats, but absolutely that's correct. So it certainly feels like between the House being out and what is at stake here and the politics of it, that we are barreling towards another shutdown, which is politically interesting, but I think not the most important part of what we're talking about here. This is potentially a real pivot point when you've got 70% of independents in that most recent New York Times Siena poll, 70% of independents against what ICE is doing.
We don't just love Margaret because she has good insights. We love Margaret because she's really good at setting up a tease.
Didn't know that. That's great.
You did it because we're going to do it when we come back. Stick around. Okay, now we have talked before about President Trump's decline in approval ratings over his first year. So this is driven down, there it is, by voter dissatisfaction on his handling of his former core strengths like the economy and immigration. But compared to what, right? Down compared to what? Most presidents lose steam after a honeymoon period. So rather than comparing Trump this January to last January, how about to recent history? Ta-da! So here is Trump's approval rating from this point in his first term. Overall, with Democrats, with Republicans, and with independents. And you see it ended up costing Republicans 41 seats, okay, in the House. Okay, so now we add on then President Joe Biden's numbers from January of 2022. They're about the same. They're a little worse with his own party, a little better with independents. But Democrats only lost 9 House seats. There were a variety of reasons, but a lot of it had to do with some screwy Republican nominees and a pro-choice backlash after the fall of Roe v. Wade. Now we bring in the present day, ta-da. And again, it's about the same. If you look at the top line, and it's even a tick better than the president's own top line numbers in 2018. But I want you to zoom in here on these numbers. The president is as strong now with Republicans as he was 8 years ago, but he is noticeably weaker with independents. And as we talked about last week, independents are the largest group by far in the American electorate, and they decide every swing district election. And they are not happy with the status quo. Even the president, in less guarded moments, can acknowledge it.
Whatever reason, it's a deep down psychological reason. Sitting presidents that won, even that won big, we won big, all 7 swing states, a popular vote. Sitting presidents don't seem to do well in the midterms.
Okay, who does well in the midterms? Our best in the business panel. That's who always does well, Margaret. I was struck by what the president said there on Air Force One because it was an acknowledgement, a rare acknowledgement
the deep
from the president.
psychological line.
Yeah, that like
going Freudian.
Yeah, that this is that midterm curse is coming for him. Do you think that the president certainly there are a lot of Republicans who understand the Minnesota piece, and this is what you alluded to in the previous block, which is that Minnesota piece is an intensifier for the numbers with independents keep saying the same thing. You are hanging around a lot of polling and focus groups. What do you know?
You and I hang out on the same corners. I know we both saw those new, I think they were Gallup data with interest, which shows historic highs now for people who say they affiliate as independents rather than as one of the two major parties. It's almost 50%. It's like 45% independents, the other two parties get the other half. And so the independent bloc matters more than ever. Now, normally, independents kind of half lean towards the left and half lean towards the right. But what you're seeing in this data is way more than half of independents are moving towards Democrats or away from Republicans. I'm not going to predict what's going to happen in the midterms. Democrats are in a terrible place. You talk to voters like, well, independent voters, what do you think of the Democrats? Well, they're terrible too. So Democrats are operating at a deficit.
So Jack, on that point, I noticed that Democrats in Congress, a number of Democrats voted to hold Bill Clinton in contempt for refusing to testify about Jeffrey Epstein. I know that there are Democrats who are trying to pass a constitutional amendment to stop pardon powers for all presidents. And then I saw Rahm Emanuel say, I want to cap the age for federal office at 75, even saying, and if I win in 28, it'll apply to me. I'll only be able to serve for one term. So I had a thought, which is, Democrats pushed democracy in the previous go-around. This time I'm hearing something like a reform message come out of Democrats. Do you buy that or not?
Well, I think that Democrats would have a much better chance with something like that than they would succumbing to the id of their base. And this is always an issue, frankly, on both sides now of the elected politicians looking at where their base, their primary voters are, and responding mostly to what they think. And Democrats could face a situation in which they kind of blow a midterm environment that's set up for them.
And which is what I was just pointing to about what happened to the Republicans in 2022.
It could very well happen. So at the same time, though, we talk a lot about how in the Trump era, everything is so unusual politically. Trump defies all these rules, conventions. But 2018 did happen. That was a pretty conventional midterm result. We see what happens when Trump himself is not on the ballot for things. So I think both parties have, what makes this so fascinating is both parties have potentially dire scenarios, but only one of them can come to pass in theory. So,
Joe, the president is going to hit the campaign trail. He's going to go out to Iowa this week, and Susie Wiles says he's going to campaign like it's 2024. That can be useful now to help his preferred primary candidates in these races, but he knows that come October, the Republicans in competitive races aren't going to want to see him, right?
Well, I don't know that he knows that, but I think Susie Wiles probably knows that. Yeah, you know, look, I think this is going to be something that, you know, as the year progresses, we're just going to have to see how this stuff is landing, the DHS stuff is landing. You know, I would just say, too, when you look at the polling that you threw up and the independent numbers, to Democrats sort of recognizing where their weaknesses are heading into what should be a favorable midterm for them. I wonder how many of those independents were former Democrats that sort of got disenchanted and maybe left, and so 100%. Those numbers are a little bit different.
And we actually saw that where now the Democrats, the share of independents leaning Democratic is up 5 points from just the previous year.
Yeah, so you know, things are shaking up there, and to the extent that President Trump is going to be a foil for Democrats, useful and potentially harmful for tough Republicans. We'll see.
Gavin Newsom, before I let you go, Gavin Newsom took a knee pad.
I was going to say, I hope there's a knee pad graphic
took knee pads to Davos in our final seconds here. He is not a reform. He's not running a reform kind of campaign. He's running a stick a broken bottle in Donald Trump's face and go as hard as possible. That is probably more appealing for Democratic primary voters.
Giving him huge name recognition. And in these early stages, when you ask Democrats, who do you want to see for president? There's no consistency, but at least that is a name everybody's heard. And the ones who want a Democrat who will fight the way Trump fights, give back to Trump what he's getting, they understand that that's what Newsom's doing. How long will it serve him? That's a big question heading into 2020.
He's not playing Moneyball. He's swinging for the fences, right? We're really grateful to you guys. Thank you so much for braving the snow to be with us. Coming up, he's won a Pulitzer Prize for his writing about the American Revolution. He's been name dropped by Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting. We are honored to have the great historian Gordon Wood with us next when the Hill Sunday returns.
What made the American Revolution revolutionary was this very incorporation of people into politics. The revolution created republics, commonwealths, which meant that the people were no longer to be considered subjects or something to be ruled as they were under monarchy.
You may never have read a single one of Gordon Wood's books. Not The Creation of the American Republic, which won the most prestigious prize for historical writing, or his Pulitzer Prize winner, The Radicalism of the American Revolution. But you surely know his work because for more than 50 years, it has deeply, profoundly shaped America's understanding of its revolution and therefore of ourselves. You don't get name-checked in Good Will Hunting for nothing. Half a century ago, that was Professor Wood, who was instrumental in the understanding of the bicentennial. Now, in his 9th decade, he rises to the challenge again for our semi-quincentennial. And we are very honored that he joins us now. Professor Wood, I want to start with the more recent past, which is where we were 50 years ago and how America understood itself on the eve of the bicentennial versus how we understand ourselves now on the brink of 250.
Well, I think we're a little bit more confused today than we were 50 years ago. We certainly seem to be. The 250th is not going to be quite as a celebration as the bicentennial was.
Now, when we think about the problems that lead to that circumstance, disunity and disharmony has got to be a pretty big piece. Talk a little, if you will, about the problem of disunity in late colonial America and on the eve of and into the Revolution.
Well, I think actually with the British legislation, that is the Stamp Act, the colonists were pretty much united against that tax. So through the decade of pamphlet exchanges and debates that followed, there was a good deal of unanimity, I think, among the colonists. They simply agreed that they would not be taxed by the British, But when the fighting began in April of 1775, then things began to divide. The colonists began to divide. Those who, about 20%, I think the best estimate, remained loyal to the crown. But the bulk of the population remained at least sympathetic to the rebels. So about 80% could not be counted on by the British. They didn't know that, of course, and as a consequence, they made all kinds of mistakes and made all kinds of assumptions that they had more loyalty in the colonies than they had in fact.
So the colonies were not one thing, right? There were 13 of them, but within the 13, there were lots of different kinds of people. These were not all Englishmen and English women. Oh, there were different languages and different cultures. Talk about that.
Yes, I think there was a great deal of diversity. Of course, there's quite a bit of difference between, say, Massachusetts, which had very few slaves, and Virginia, where 40% of its society was enslaved, or South Carolina, where the majority of people were enslaved. So there's a good deal of difference between these colonies, and we probably don't appreciate just how distinctive and how loyal people were to their colonies. They had histories of almost a century or more to fall back on it. So when the break comes, it's 13 independent states, and that's just simply hard for us to appreciate. The United States had a literal meaning that it's since lost. It's much more close to the existing European Union. The United States of America is simply more like the European Union in 1776 than it is today.
And so when we think about why they fought, the time between the opening of hostilities in 1775 and the declaration in 1776, which doesn't just declare the aim of the effort, but also what the principles are that will guide it. A lot of making it a nation must have taken place in that year, from spring to spring, must have been consequential. Talk about the formation, if you will, of the ethos of the idea.
Well, when the redcoats start killing colonists, that had a profound effect. And then, of course, when the British begin to mount a huge army and send it over to conquer the colonists, then all things have changed completely. So I think by the spring of 1776, most of the colonial leaders were bent on independence. They didn't need Thomas Paine to tell them that they should be independent. He just voiced what they were thinking, and it was a public expression of what many colonists certainly quietly were planning on and thinking about. They already had plans for erecting their new governments as early as the April of 1776. So the Declaration of Independence followed from the feelings of independence, didn't create the sentiment for independence.
A question that a lot of people are asking themselves, and that I put to a lot of people in this semi-quincentennial year. I'm going to learn how to say that, I promise. That I am putting to myself and to a lot of people, and I think is in part answered in your masterful, fantastic book, Empire of Liberty. And it is the question of, was it worth it? And we've had a lot of tussle over the meaning of America and the failures of America versus the glories of America. And a lot of living got fit into 250 years. But I put the question to you, I put the question before you, for all that was wrong with it, at various points from the founding, and you talked about slavery. We could talk about the exclusion of women. We could talk about what happened to indigenous peoples. But with all of that, question to you, Professor, was it worth it?
Oh, of course. What created what became, they could scarcely foresee this, what became the most powerful nation in the history of the world. So it was a momentous event. Whether you agree with the results or not, you have to recognize that this was a momentous event, creating a nation that was at least ostensibly dedicated to liberty. I think it's important to understand that the United States is the one that created the anti-slave movement. Slavery had been taken for granted for thousands of years. It becomes a problem to be solved with the American Revolution. And the northern states, the 8 northern states, are the first states in the history of the world to abolish slavery where it previously legally existed. And the South, which had taken slavery for granted as the lowest and basest level in a hierarchical society, was suddenly put on the defensive. Now, it took another 80-some years and a civil war to end it, but certainly the momentum to end slavery began with the American Revolution, and that includes the whole Western Hemisphere. It put all the slaveholders in both South America and in the Caribbean and in the south of the United States on the defensive. They had to explain and defend slavery for the first time in the history of the world.
Professor Gordon Wood, we thank you for that, and we thank you for all of your work. I hope everybody turns a page. We appreciate you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, Knox, Locks, and 2 Smoking Barrels, your revolutionary almanac is next. This is your almanac for today, Sunday, January 25th, 2026. On this day in 1776, 250 years ago, an unlikely hero began the final leg of an unlikely expedition as Henry Knox, a bookseller turned artilleryman in George Washington's army, reached Framingham, Massachusetts with desperately needed cannons for the fight to free Boston. As Knox and his noble train of artillery arrived on the outskirts of Boston for inspection by his fellow Massachusettan, John Adams, few would have expected Knox to have pulled it off. Before the war, Knox spent his young life as a beefy, bookish intellectual, but he loved history, including military science, especially artillery. That's what prompted Knox to make a bold proposal to Washington. There were British guns at Fort Ticonderoga, now in American hands, that could be used to lift the British siege of Boston. But how would you get 60 tons of artillery across nearly 300 miles of forbidding New England terrain in the dead of winter? Who did Henry Knox think he was? Washington gave his blessing, likely with little hope of actual success, but fueled by patriotism, hope, and an insatiable hunger for military victory, and according to his diary, the relishing venison prepared for him by a friendly local tribe along the way, Knox delivered. And it was a booming success. Those cannons in Dorchester Heights forced the Redcoats to finally free Boston. Knox had found his calling and went from bookworm to bigwig, as he would eventually serve as the nation's first Secretary of War. So whatever you're gunning for this week, we hope it's a blast. Until next time.